Good evening and welcome to the Week in Review. I'm Paris Schutz. We'll be joined by our Week in Review guests in just a moment, but first, some of today's top stories. New fallout today from the wrongful police raid into the home of Anjanette Young. Mayor Lori Lightfoot says she's directed the city's law department to withdraw a motion to sanction Young's attorney for what the law department said was a violation of a court order that he went public with the police video. This comes after some aldermen invoked a rarely used law to call for a special city council meeting next Tuesday, and that was to call on the mayor to do the same thing that she instructed to do today. We'll have more on the fallout from this in just a minute. The controversial head of Chicago's police union faces possible termination from the police department. FOP Lodge 7 President John Catanzara is under fire for multiple inflammatory social media posts, including one in which he said Muslims are, quote, all deserve a bullet. Chicago Police Board member Andrea Zopp reviewed a case brought by the Civilian Office of Police Accountability and ultimately recommended Catanzara be terminated. That will trigger a hearing before the full police board, which will ultimately decide Catanzara's fate. Chicago police announced they've made another arrest in the shooting death of former firefighter Dwayne Williams. Williams was killed earlier this month after leaving a popcorn shop on the south side, and that was during a botched carjacking attempt. Police announced charges of first-degree murder and attempted vehicular hijacking against 18-year-old Dwayne Johnson. This follows yesterday's arrest of a 15-year-old for alleged murder. Today, that suspect was ordered held without bond. Police say there is still one suspect at large. And Illinois public health officials report 7,300 new cases of COVID-19 in the last 24 hours, with 181 additional deaths. That makes for a total of more than 886,000 cases and a grim milestone, 15,015 deaths. The 7-day test positivity rate ticks down again, now standing at 9.7%. And joining us now are Amanda Vinicky of WTTW News, Lourdes Duarte of WGN-TV News, Craig Delamore of WBBM News Radio, and Mila Kumpalova of Chalk Beat Chicago. So let's get right to it. Craig Delamore, week one of COVID vaccinations in Chicago, Illinois, and all across the country. How is it going so far?
So far, so good, but there's some bumps in the road ahead. The thousands of doses that were supposed to come into Illinois did make it the way they were supposed to in hospitals, and that's where it's going to be focused on first. Hospital workers, frontline workers are the first ones getting them. We've had any number of ceremonial first shots at different hospitals around the city, but as the week was going on, word came that the next shipments of doses are going to only be about half the size of the amount that the hospitals and frankly the entire state was expecting to get. And that was a surprise, not necessarily a catastrophe, but it certainly does throw one more curve in a year of curves.
Not a welcome surprise, and Governor Pritzker echoed disappointment about that. Other governors across the country were saying the same thing. Meanwhile, Pfizer says we've got a couple million doses sitting around waiting for a home. Amanda Vinicky, what's going on here?
We don't have any good answers to that, Paris. It appears as if there's some sort of standoff there. Pfizer, in its statement, tried to make clear, hey, we're working with the federal government, not really trying to start a fight with the Trump administration, it seemed, even as the President Trump is on his way out. But nonetheless, this is just something where people are so excited. I mean, having attended some of these ceremonial first shots in the arm, it's not often that you get stabbed and you get a shot and people rejoice, but there were people at hospitals saying, this is the greatest day, and everybody's masked, but you can still see people smiling via the muscle movement in their eyes.
And I should mention we're looking at Vice President Mike Pence right now getting his vaccination today on camera. Lourdes Duarte, right before we went on air, the FDA approves a second vaccine, this one from Moderna. Do you think that will mean more good news for Illinoisans who are waiting for this?
Yeah, they're saying that shipment should be coming in. We expect another shipment in the coming week. So that will add to those numbers. I think today the last number that we got was 17,000 people in Illinois have already been vaccinated. And you see those numbers from the first day. We had like 3,000 people in the first couple of days. So you see those numbers increasing as they get some of these kinks worked out and they get a little bit more information on exactly how this program is going to roll out. Because, just think about it, that this is all brand new to so many folks. They don't even know how this system is going to be put in place. So everybody's just trying to figure it out. So yeah, good news coming in from the FDA this afternoon, just in the last, 15 minutes or so, that Moderna vaccine was approved.
So a second company gets their vaccine approved, 17,000 vaccinations, although we should note that it takes 2 vaccinations, so they're going to have to wait 3 weeks to get their second vaccination. And Mila, given the gradual rollout here, what would be your best guess as to when the country starts to open up again and people feel safe to congregate and we move past this?
My guess is probably as good as yours on that. I know something that we're watching very closely here at Chalk Beach, Chicago, is when teachers will be able to get their vaccinations, a kind of a key question when it comes to reopening schools and resuming in-person instruction. And we still don't have complete clarity on that either. We know that they are considered by the state certainly essential workers, but we're not sure what place exactly they will take in line and what the timeline would be.
But I do think that touches on just the sort of the struggle here, because again, folks are rejoicing. It is the beginning of the end, but just the beginning. This does not mean, and I think this is going to be a challenge for political leaders who, wow, people are really sick of staying at home. They're going to be particularly sick of it if they have to stay home once winter is over and the weather gets nice again here in Chicago. And that is the challenge. Until you have that herd immunity and enough people vaccinated, it's still very much living in the midst of a pandemic.
And this initial phase only represents a fraction of the healthcare workers, and then they're going to move into the long-term care facilities. Lourdes, you were going to weigh in here.
No, yeah, I was just going to add to what Amanda was saying. I was reading one article today that it talked about CVS and Walgreens possibly having the vaccine available to the general public in the spring. So that puts us anywhere from March 20th to June 20th. I mean, that's a long range there. So, when you talk about when will things get back to normal, I mean, yeah, we might be looking at summer or even past that. So
yeah,
keep hanging on, right?
If I could just add, I talked earlier today with Dr. Kiran Joshi, who is one of the leaders of the Cook County Department of Public Health, and his oft-heard phrase during that interview was, "I'm just asking people to be patient," because it really is a massive rollout. And yes, it's probably going to be the summer or later before it's the general public. Even the pharmacies, the first thing they're going to do is start giving them to people in long-term care, in nursing homes. They are going to be handling most of that. And then eventually it will go to the public.
All right, let's move on to the other big story this week. That very disturbing video of Anjanette Young and that wrongful warrant and break-in into her house by the police. Mayor Lightfoot spent 2 days apologizing, but her tone shifted dramatically. Let's take a look.
Knowing that my words will not change what happened to you and your family almost 2 years ago, I nonetheless say, I am sorry. It's been painful, and upsetting.
So this all comes after the investigative reporting from CBS 2. First of all, Mila, when you first saw that body cam video, what went through your mind?
I certainly, as I think many others, thought about Breonna Taylor and how a raid on her home obviously went horribly wrong. And so there was, I think, for many, an especially emotional reaction, because there is that, we all have that on the back of our minds.
Absolutely, and Lightfoot had an emotional reaction, although she earlier this week said she had not been made aware of this case earlier on in her tenure. We should mention that this happened before she took office. She said she hadn't been made aware of it. Then today she had to backtrack it and say, oh, there were emails that reached her inbox that flagged this for her. She just didn't recall them. Amanda, why the flip-flopping?
Why the flip-flopping is because she had to have recognized, as did somebody within her administration, that reporters, particularly those who uncovered this, were going to uncover those emails, and she could not stand in front of people and say, I had no clue, when in fact she did. Caveat there, because I do think that not pardoning the Lightfoot administration in any way, shape, or form, merely saying that watching the video is certainly a very different thing than hearing about it, I think. And she did say that she hadn't actually seen the footage until this week. So while she had been made aware of it, she had said in the midst of a very busy time for the mayor's office, she hadn't seen it, because I do not know how you could be a human being, particularly a woman, particularly a Black woman, and see that footage and not be horrified, scared, maddened, incensed.
It was a similar explanation given to by Mayor Rahm Emanuel with the Laquan McDonald video, and remember, he fought the release of that video. Craig Dellamore, given the history here with Laquan McDonald and what we just mentioned, is it surprising to you that the city's law department would go to the court and try to block CBS 2 from airing this, thinking that that was a smart move?
I wish I could say it was a surprise. Unfortunately, the law department has a history of sometimes thinking more about the law than the humans involved in the law. Even Rahm Emanuel had a complaint when one of the other cases of a police shooting that was controversial, when Quintonio LeGrier was shot along with an innocent bystander, Betty Jones, that the city actually tried to sue the family of Quintonio LeGrier for damages because of his actions that led to his own death. And when Mayor Emanuel heard about that, he was horrified and brought an end to it. I think a similar thing happened here. They tried to block it just by rote because they block attempts to get information regularly.
Yeah, and there's some anger at the Corporation Counsel, Mark Flessner. Craig, do you think his job is on the line or should be on the line?
The mayor yesterday said that she is reviewing all the facts in the case, and she said, I'm not going to say anything about any jobs until I finished reviewing this. But that made the indication that that certainly could be a possibility.
And already advocates are calling for that. Activists say they want Flessner's head to roll. They do blame him, and Lightfoot perhaps should as well, because again, if something like this, how you can see that video, not have a reaction, and then not bring it to the mayor's attention, Paris, as you pointed out, given particularly the history in Chicago with Laquan McDonald, that is a failure somewhere if it was not brought to the very top, highest levels.
And I did speak with some aldermen saying they were thinking about calling for Flessner to be removed. Lourdes Duarte, the mayor admitted that she needed to rebuild trust, that she perhaps broke some of that trust, especially since she campaigned on police reform, on being transparent, on bringing in the light. What do you think she needs to do to rebuild the trust that might have been lost this week?
It's going to be a difficult challenge, that's for sure. But I think, there's a couple things that she's doing already. One of them, she said she wanted to have this meeting with Anjanette. She apologized. So she's done a couple of things that lead her in that direction. So we'll see where that goes from here on out. I think another thing that needs to be mentioned that probably the general public doesn't know very much about is just how information is handed to the media, what it takes to get our hands on data from city, state, federal governments. It's not necessarily as easy as one might think. I mean, you have to put in FOIA requests. A lot of times those requests get denied. And I mean, I don't know any reporter in the city that will tell you, oh yeah, my FOIA request gets approved each and every single time. Everybody's got a horror story about how data is oftentimes kept from some of the journalists. So I think there needs to be a revamp on how that system works and how information gets disseminated to some of these reporters.
Well, in fact, some FOIA requests in this case had been denied and gone all the way to the Attorney General's office. Amanda, isn't it CBS 2? There's no, there's no confirmation that they got this video from the lawyer. So why would the Corporation Counsel think they're in any way in the wrong for airing a video? There's a robust First Amendment here.
A robust First Amendment. I mean, there are some issues, and obviously, I don't know what all CBS did and asked for, but I think there are challenges, and this is something that the mayor's administration and legislators, the attorney general, say it needs to be revisited because there are limits on police videos that can be made public and shared. The crazy thing here is that one of the FOIAs that was denied was Anjanette Young seeking video of the police invading her very own home. And so that was a request that was denied.
And just a point of clarification for everybody.
On privacy issues. So the fact that she was the one who requested it sort of takes away that issue of privacy that they could have turned it down for.
Right, yeah, very interesting point. And to clarify for our audience, FOIA meaning Freedom of Information Act request. Lourdes, speaking of access, you got access to the new Cook County Circuit Court clerk, Iris Martinez's office. She, of course, taking over for the controversial and colorful former clerk, Dorothy Brown. What did you find when you went in there?
You know what? It was meant to be a very sort of simple day in the life, walk us through what's going on your first 2 weeks in office. And so she says that there were a lot of boxes laying around, that she had to get those moved onto storage. She said, obviously, social distancing has been a little bit of an issue because it is quite a tight office. So she's moved people to other neighboring buildings. She said she noticed some issues with pay structures where people were maybe making more than the actual job that they were performing. So those were her allegations. A couple hours before the story aired, Dorothy Brown sent out a 3-page statement basically saying that Iris Martinez had no clue, and then really criticizing her. And I think this is what upset people the most for, as she called it, and I'm quoting here, making the clerk's office look like Puerto Rico by hiring Puerto Ricans, also making a mockery or making a mockery of the English language by speaking Spanish while she's at work.
And I wanted to ask you, Lourdes, when you saw that statement from Dorothy Brown, what was your reaction?
Yeah, you know, it's tough because there was so much in her statement. It came across to me as just sort of somebody who was upset and angry, definitely wanted her voice heard and wanted her message heard, but just was throwing sort of everything at the wall to see what would get some attention.
Very, very interesting story there. Let's move on to Chicago Public Schools. Mila, you mentioned you're following, when teachers are going to get vaccinated. The CTU lost a bid at the State Labor Board to block a return to in-person learning. Take us behind that decision.
That's right. The State Labor Relations Boards issued a split ruling earlier this week, blocking an injunction that the teachers union in Chicago had filed, seeking to block reopening schools until the district and the union had negotiated an agreement on how exactly that would play out. Now, that's not clearly the end of their legal battle. They have essentially a court hearing slated in late January that the union is now trying to move sooner. And so there might still be developments and surprises ahead of plans to reopen schools for in-person instruction in early 2021.
And meanwhile, there are only, I think, reports that 77,000 kids are going to take advantage and go back to school now, and we're only talking about, cluster pre-K and K through 8, so not high school students. Right. Why the low number? And there's also data showing that it's more white students that are going to go back, but not Black or Hispanic.
The districts did a survey of parents, so they reached out to parents a few weeks ago, looking to find out who is planning to send their kids back in person. For some special education students and pre-K, that'll be in January, and then February 1st for other elementary students. I believe that there were questions on the survey about the reasons parents responded one way or the other. We haven't seen the responses to those questions, so that would be interesting data to take a look at. Clearly, there's still concerns about the safety of returning to in-person instruction. And obviously, parents had to make that decision at a time when the number of COVID cases was really spiking and we were cresting with the second rate surge of infections. And without a doubt, that's played a part. And it seems like there is a level of skepticism too about some of the district's efforts to ensure a safe return. And there's some deep-seated mistrust about the districts really delivering on a long list of measures that they have said they're taking as they're gear up to reopen school buildings.
We'll have to see how that plays out over the next month. Let's move on to the state budget. Governor J.B. Pritzker announced, quote, painful budget cuts this week and laid them squarely at the feet of Republicans. Take a look.
Republicans, both inside and outside the General Assembly, fought tooth and nail against the best solution for our working families, lying about what the fair tax would do. Today, as a first step toward balancing the current year's budget, I'm presenting over $700 million in initial cuts to our executive branch agencies. These are cuts that are under my control to make as governor without help from the General Assembly.
Craig Dellimore, $700 million there out of a $3.9 billion possible gap that has to be closed. Well, where's the rest of it going to come from?
Well, and the fact is that all of the analysts are saying even those cuts, 700 million, are not enough. But I think what the state is hoping for and may not get is for the federal government to provide some millions of dollars, maybe billions of dollars in aid that would help make up for the revenue losses that the state is suffering because of the coronavirus. Also this week, in making an argument against any cuts, some of the progressive members of the General Assembly put forth a proposal that maybe you should cut some of those tax credits and tax loopholes that some of the biggest companies have. Some, like say Amazon, are making more money than they were making before because of coronavirus, and they're saying let's take away some of those incentives and use that money to start filling some of the holes.
That is a good point. Given how much so many people are hurting, companies like Amazon have made billions and billions and billions. Amanda, while this is going on, this legislative inquiry into Mike Madigan and ComEd wrapped up. What was the ultimate outcome out of this exercise?
Well, we did get, I guess, some airing of dirty laundry when it comes to Madigan's emails, or that would be Madigan's confidant, Mike McLean's emails with ComEd, but Madigan often referred to in them with those capital letters, our friend. So that was really what we got out of this. Some information, but we really saw, I think, the partisanship that is emblematic of how Madigan has retained that grasp on power at play, where Democrats, even at a time where Madigan is hyper unpopular throughout Illinois, that Democrats are very much sticking by him, at least some of them, including those that were on the committee. And so he was never called to testify, even though this committee did have subpoena power.
More Democrats sticking with him than not sticking with him or breaking away from him, at least at this point, 19 still breaking away. Lourdes Duarte, Rahm Emanuel, Politico referred to it as the first campaign he ever lost. He's not going to be Secretary of Transportation, even though he lobbied pretty hard. Was it the anger on the progressive side of the Democratic Party, Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez in New York, that sunk him? Because she's basically saying, we don't want Rahm Emanuel in the cabinet because of what happened with Laquan McDonald.
Yeah, I mean, your guess is as good as mine. I think at this point, the Secretary of Transportation is going to be Pete Buttigieg, who talked about, O'Hare just even in his remarks when those were made, when the announcement was made, which also serves a good purpose for Illinois. He's got a good connection to Illinois and Chicago. And as I mentioned, he talked about O'Hare and the airport. So I think it can only mean good things for the city as well. So that's a good get for Illinois as well.
He talked about O'Hare as a place of romance, which O'Hare subsequently owned after that, and all kinds of stories of romance at O'Hare went public. Craig Dellimore, you hinted at this in the past. We only have a few seconds left. The city needs relief from Washington. We've been hearing about a $900 billion stimulus bill for a while, still hasn't passed. What do you think is going to happen?
It may pass because they don't want to go to Christmas Eve or the day after Christmas when the current benefits expire. But at the moment, that aid does not include aid for cities and states. And people like Mayor Lightfoot and governors around the country are dead set against that.
And we're seeing Mitch McConnell there, who's opposed to that money for cities and states. There's a $160 billion side bill that was siphoned off here, but it doesn't look like that stands much of a chance, at least now. Anyway, we are out of time, so my thanks to Amanda Vinicky, Lourdes Duarte, Craig Dellimore, and Mila Kumpalova. And that is our show for this Friday night. Don't forget you can get Chicago Tonight and the Week in Review streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news. And be sure to tune in to us tomorrow night at 6 for Chicago Tonight Latino Voices, and then 6 o'clock Sunday for Chicago Tonight Black Voices. And then we're back here 7 o'clock all next week. And we'll show you how the South Shore neighborhood is doing 6 months after civil unrest and property damage there. And then we head to Pilsen to learn how to make Mexican drinking chocolate from scratch. Now for the Week in Review, I'm Paris Schutz. Thank you so much for watching. Stay healthy and safe. Have a great weekend.
Closed captioning for this program is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, pleased to give back to the community through numerous charitable initiatives.